Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Becky with the good hair, and if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and also click the bell because you do want to be notified when I drop new videos. I wanted to talk today about a phrase that needs to stop, and it is the phrase all lives matter, or hashtag all lives matter. Some people might think that on its face it's not that bad because, oh, what's the matter? You're just saying that everybody matters and that everybody's equal. But the problem is that right now we live in a society where clearly not all lives are created equal, and we are trying to change that. The problem with All Lives Matter is that it was created in response to the Black Lives Matter movement and the Black Lives Matter hashtag. Black Lives Matter was started to raise awareness about police brutality and how police officers disproportionately racially profile and brutalize and murder Black men and women in this country. And the fact that All Lives Matter was started in response to that proves how problematic All Lives Matter is. The problem is that Black men and women were saying police officers are killing us and we need to raise awareness about that and it needs to stop, and the police forces need to be changed dramatically. And people said, wait a minute, what about all lives? That's the problem. The problem is that the All Lives Matter hashtag was started to diminish and minimize Black men and women who are speaking out and raising their voices. So now with the protests that are going on in response to the murder of George Floyd and other Black men and women in this country, the All Lives Matter hashtag is going around again. I have seen 2 letters to the editor posted in a local publication about how all lives matter. I want to read a few excerpts from both of these letters to you just to show what the arguments are, and we can talk about why these ideas are problematic. The first letter was written by someone of Asian descent, and his letter is simply titled All Lives Matter. And I want to read a couple excerpts for you. So throughout the letter, this person talks about how he is of Asian descent and how he just doesn't really think that we should be described by our color at all, and that we shouldn't see color and stuff like that. And then he ends up saying, as many people are marching in protest and exclaiming, I can't breathe or Black Lives Matter, we should bear in mind that all lives matter. Oh boy. This is not just Blacks. Yes, we seem to see a lot in the news where we hear a Black person was shot by or killed by law enforcement. But we need to bear in mind that there are also other races and ethnicity that also get hurt every day under the hands of law enforcement. And then he says, sometimes it's an accident. Sometimes it's a matter of split-second decision where an officer has to act and decides to pull the trigger. And very seldom, I feel, it would be on a purpose that leads to death. Okay. There's so many problems with this. So number one, he's saying that it's not just Black people that are killed and that it doesn't really disproportionately happen to Black men and women in this country, which is completely false. We are not saying that only Black men and women are murdered by police officers, but it is disproportionately minorities and specifically Black men and women in this country. That's just a fact. The problem with his statement of saying that it's not just Blacks and that we need to remember that all lives matter. The conversation right now is about Black lives and about how Black men and women have been discriminated against, enslaved, and brutalized and murdered for centuries. And we have a disgustingly racist history as a nation, and we still have racism systemically in this country. And I still see people becoming triggered by the phrase systemic racism. And I still see people who say systemic racism doesn't exist, or even white privilege doesn't exist, when they do. They indeed do exist. Saying that we need to remember that all lives matter makes it seem like, oh, Black Lives Matter already, and we don't have systemic racism, so we need to talk about all lives rather than specifically Black lives, when in reality, throughout our entire history, Black lives have not mattered, and that's wrong. And we're talking about Black lives right now. The conversation needs to be about Black lives, because Black men and women are targeted by police officers in this country. And it needs to stop, and it needs to change, and the entire police culture needs to change. The entire system of policing needs to change in this country, and that's what the protests are about. They are raising awareness about police brutality against specifically Black lives, and saying all lives matter is just diminishing that. It's diminishing the Black men and women who are speaking out and raising their voices when they need space to speak. And you're just trying to diminish their voices, and that's wrong to do that. We have so many organizations all across the country that are for specific things. You don't see people going to marathons that are raising money and awareness about breast cancer, and then people are saying, all cancers matter. That's just not a thing. The event is for breast cancer. No one is saying that other cancers don't matter, but they're saying the focus right now at this event is on breast cancer. Saying Black Lives Matter is not saying other lives do not matter. Black Lives Matter is stating that throughout history, Black lives have been shown to not matter because they've been enslaved, they've been discriminated against, they've been brutalized, they have been murdered. And we still have racism in this country, and that needs to change, and we need to continue to fight against that. That is what the Black Lives Matter movement is all about. And it also includes fighting against police brutality, because law enforcement still discriminates against Black lives specifically. They racially profile Black men and women. That's why the hashtag is Black Lives Matter, because we are stating that Black lives matter as well, and we need to continue to fight against the systemic racism in this country. I also want to touch on how he completely disregards that police officers purposefully murder Black men and women in this country. He says that it's oftentimes just a quick decision, a split-second decision, and they just pull the trigger on accident. You might want to research other countries. In other countries, that split-second accident of pulling the trigger is not a thing. That does not happen in other countries, because other countries are not as trigger happy as police officers are in this country. That is a huge can of worms that you just opened up by saying that hundreds of police officers are just accidentally pulling the trigger. You're saying that Americans are just more trigger happy? The fact that he says that cops have a split-second decision and they just decide to shoot somebody, obviously that's not accurate. It's being very disingenuous, because we see every day cops on tape killing Black men and women. They shoot them, they kneel on their necks, they perform illegal chokeholds. It doesn't matter if the chokehold is illegal, they do it anyway. Cops are hired to supposedly serve and protect. They are not hired to murder people. If you're saying that cops have a pattern of supposedly accidentally shooting people, then they should not have their guns. They shouldn't. They should have them in their vehicles. Because clearly, if you really think that there's a pattern of cops supposedly accidentally just shooting everybody. They shouldn't have the guns to begin with then, since they don't know how to use them. And they're just trigger happy. That is a problem. But obviously we know that it's not always, like he said, accidents. So he goes on to say, yes, there are good cops and bad cops everywhere, but I don't think even bad cops have the intention to kill the innocent. I don't have all the facts and details of why officers would place their knee to pin a person down, even more so on their neck. You don't need all the details. Cops should not be doing that, period. Derek Chauvin knelt on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That's a fact that you should know, number one, and number two, he should not have been on his neck to begin with. The fact that you think that there's a situation that would make it okay for a cop to kneel on someone's neck is a huge issue that you need to come to grips with. You're excusing cops murdering people? You are excusing cops kneeling on people's necks? And you think that there is a situation where that would be acceptable? Oh my God, that's a huge issue. And he said that he doesn't think it's the cops' intent to kill innocent people. The video evidence that we have of cops killing people in cold blood every day would prove otherwise. This person obviously puts cops on a pedestal and thinks that they can do no wrong and thinks that it's just not possible that a cop would murder somebody. That's just not possible. Yes, it is. I hate to break it to you, sweetie, but cops are human beings. Cops are not angels. Cops can commit murder, and they do. It's proven. And just because they're a cop doesn't mean that they're this perfect little angel here to protect and serve and never do anything wrong. They do. They do. This person needs to come to grips with reality because obviously they're in some sort of fantasy land where all cops are little angels and we need to worship the ground that they walk on. And that's not the case. That is not reality. And this person is using the all lives matter phrase to diminish what is going on in the Black community. And that's really sad. So at the end of his letter, he talked about how all lives matter and we need to stop identifying people by their color and we'll all have world peace and yada, yada, yada. If only it were that simple. But in the real world, it's not that simple. We need to lift up Black lives and we need to fight for justice and police reform, whether you think that that would be defunding police and that can mean many different things. We need to acknowledge that there is systemic racism in this country. And by saying that all lives matter and diminishing what is going on in the Black community, that does more harm than good. That doesn't help anybody. Even if you have good intentions and you just want world peace, trying to diminish Black lives and their experiences isn't going to help anybody. So the second letter I wanted to react to was written by someone who I believe I've seen on Facebook before on this publication's Facebook comment section. This person isn't vehemently racist throughout his letter, but his comments that I've seen pop up in the comments section are deeply racist. So even though this person's letter is deeply problematic, he's not like violently, outwardly racist, but his comments that I've seen pop up are super racist. And this letter is pretty insane. So this guy kind of was doing the all lives matter type of stuff within his letter, and he was responding to another letter to the editor. And in the original letter to the editor, I guess the person who wrote it had said, racism is white people's original sin. This guy that I'm reacting to got super triggered by that, I guess. He said, That's a direct quote. It's also a huge stereotype and gigantic lie. For far too long, we have accepted these comments without direct challenge. Racism is not exclusive to white people. Far from it. Hate comes in all colors, all races, and far too often it's directed at those of another race simply for that reason. So he's trying to reverse racism us. Okay. Then he said, I've literally stood and fought white racists. I think by white racists, I think he means people who are racist against white people. Again, the reverse racism stuff. Many years ago, I was jumped simply because I was white in a restaurant in this very town. Okay. I will bet that you were not jumped because you were white. That did not happen. I guarantee it. That is such a lie. When does that happen? When? When have you ever heard of a hate crime committed against someone simply because they were white? I have never heard of that in my life. Ever. He said, so do not continue to spread the false narrative that racism and its hate is exclusive to white people. The problem with his statement is that white people have, for all of history of this country and numerous other countries, white people have always had the upper hand. White people have always been in power. White people were the ones enslaving black people. White people were the ones taking over the Native American land and brutalizing Native American people. White people were the ones who discriminated against black people and had laws that made it legal to discriminate and segregate. White people are the ones who are committing hate crimes against black people in this country. The problem is that white people have always had the power, and we have, as white people, white privilege. We just do. It doesn't mean we don't have problems and struggles and adversities, but we have privilege. We don't experience the racism and discrimination that black people and other minorities do. We have that privilege. I'm going to assume that he doesn't even acknowledge that he has white privilege at all. I'm going to assume that he doesn't believe white privilege exists. So I heard a quote that's really great and a really great explanation of why the All Lives Matter phrase is so problematic. And I'll quote it right now. All lives will not matter until Black lives matter, which is so true because black men and women in this country are discriminated against, brutalized, and murdered by law enforcement, and there's still hate crimes committed against them every day in this country. And until Black Lives Matter in this country, and until we have justice for the black community, all lives will not matter. We don't have that yet, but I hope we will someday. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs up and remember to subscribe if you're not already, and also click the bell so that you'll be notified when I drop another one. And I hope you guys are staying safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.